Most of us don't play golf to be terrorized. Sure, we like a good challenge and the feeling of overcoming mild obstacles, but playing in a state of fear is not what we associate with having fun. In fact, most architects spend their time trying to make their courses attractive and inviting. But there was one person who never got that message. His name was Pete Dye, and he was better than any of the other great modern designers at creating unease in his golf courses and at showing you the stark consequences of a bad choice, a bad shot, or just plain bad fate. Hello, I'm Duncan. I'm the architecture editor at Golf Digest, and today we're going to take an up-close look at one of Pete Dye's most terrifying designs, the Par-3 17th at the Straits course at Whistling Straits outside of Kohler, Wisconsin. Architects are usually wary of making their courses too difficult, but I often compare Pete Dye's courses to horror movies. His most effective holes possess a ghastly visual element, at least in the vernacular of golf. In the same way a filmmaker might depict gore or a supernatural face of evil, Dye did the same with his hazards. He played with sand, grass, bulkheads, water, trees and mounds, the way directors play with blood, shadows, music, and silence, orchestrating ominous senses of dread, surprise, and apprehension. Water doesn't just nudge up to fairways and greens, it slams against their edges, making clear that no middle ground exists. He dug deep and scattered pot bunkers that have the power to attract innocence like an abandoned shack in the woods. At places like the ocean course at Kiowa Island, he built sand traps that were so deep it could nearly be impossible to get out. Like in any good horror film, these kind of golf holes can be disconcerting and frightening, but you have a hard time looking away. Dye's courses attempted to stop golfers in their tracks, to make them uncomfortable, to make them question their ability and wonder what was around the next corner. These are the exact emotions and sensitivities that rush through you when you stare at the green at Whistling Straits' 17th hole, one of Dye's most inspired and formidable nightmares. From the tournament tees, it can measure as much as 250 yards, which equates to a 3 or 4 iron shot for the professionals when they've competed here during 3 previous PGA championships, a U.S. Senior Open, and the 2021 Ryder Cup. The tees most of us should play range from between 130 and 195 yards. The green at the 17th, nicknamed Pinched Nerve, is benched into the side of a bluff that tumbles down into Lake Michigan, and it can be a terrifying shot, especially factoring in your state of well-being, which is likely to be fragile at this point in the round. The putting surface is fairly large, almost 8,000 square feet, so there's room to land a shot even with a longer club, and most of the contours flow right to left off the bank. But Dye is doing a couple of additional things here with the design to keep you off balance. The height of the tees are positioned to give you just enough of a sightline onto the putting surface to see it, but they're not high enough to give you a true sense of its depth, which is nearly 50 yards from back to front. The right third of the green is also hidden behind a huge mound, as you can see here, and that makes its overall size look much smaller from the tee than it actually is. He also throws all of this visual noise into the space between the tee and the green. Bunkers, upright railroad ties, shrubbery, wispy fescues, land that's crumbling away toward the water. He's effectively flooding your eye line with distraction, making it harder to commit to a swing. And then of course he shows you right here, without any obstruction, the clean infinity edge of the left side of the green with the lake beyond. Essentially a flashing red light, showing you where you absolutely cannot afford to go, which is tumbling down the bluff. Because from down there, you may or may not find your golf ball, assuming it doesn't bounce into the water. And even if you do, odds are you won't be able to get it back up to the green on your first attempt. You'd need Jordan Spieth-like skills to pull that off. Add it all up and you have a hole where there's actually a fair amount of room to play to, including some fairways short of the green, but instead you become consumed with all the looming danger around it, real or imagined. This is classic Pete Dye and how he built suspense and sleight of hand into course after course in an almost Hitchcockian way. He gives you an escape, whether it's a wide but hidden fairway or a section of green sitting beyond an ominous bunker, but the architecture makes you almost too afraid to take it. In the case of Whistling Straits' 17th, the mound short and right of the green with a bunker carved into the top looks like an insurmountable crater blocking your approach to that side. But the top edge is actually 6 yards short of the green, and if you can clear it, the slopes behind it will help move your ball toward the center of the putting surface. The mound itself deserves a closer look. Until he passed away in 2020, Dye never stopped innovating or looking for new ways to present obstacles. and his career can be broken into early, middle, and late periods, largely defined by how he shaped his courses. When he began building Whistling Straits around 1996, this kind of bunker was a relatively new tool in his arsenal. This bunker, we'll call it a volcano bunker, appears a few times at Whistling Straits, mostly in the dunes to the periphery of the holes. But other than a smaller version to the left of the 8th green, the volcano bunker on 17 is by far the tallest and most impactful example on this course. Once he got into the 2000s, these things began popping up everywhere. This, for example, is the Pete Dye course at French Lick in Indiana. Innovation was Dye's calling card as an architect, mainly because the sites he worked on demanded it. The land that owner Herb Kohler gave him to build Whistling Straits didn't have a lot going for it other than the views of Lake Michigan, although admittedly that's a pretty good asset. The property was 2 miles of farmland along a bluff about 50 feet above the lake, most of it dead flat and indistinguishable from everything else around it. Parts of it were an old Army airfield that still had concrete bunkers, and even artillery shells that were uncovered during construction that had to be carefully removed and detonated. In most situations, the architect and owner would have just put the holes up on top of the bluff and relied on the views to carry the golf. But Kohler had bigger plans, and he and Dye set out to construct a course that would be reminiscent of an Irish links and capable of hosting major championships. So Dye knew he couldn't just stay up on top. He had to get the golf holes down to the water if the course was going to live up to Kohler's standards. The only way to do that was to step the land down into stages by cutting directly into the bluffs, peeling back the land layer by layer. And this was an extraordinarily immense and costly operation, especially considering he'd have to do it across 2 full miles of lake frontage. This is basically how they built the course. So here's a cross-section of the Whistling Straits site with the upland bluff tumbling down to the waterline here. And this is about 50 feet from waterline to the top of the bluff. You might think you would want to come in here and start cutting, but this angle is much too steep to start cutting here. So what they would do is they would start inland and take a section of land like this and dig in here. So here's your excavator. You dig in this land here, and you excavate it and you rotate it out and redistribute it higher up. And then they would use this land to build those high mounds. If you've ever been to Whistling Straits, you'll know that those dunes near the clubhouse on the inland part of the golf course are quite high. And from there, you dig down again, another piece, and you can see this is a massive amount of earth that they're moving. You're digging down here, and you're transferring this back up to the next level. And now you're using that to shape your greens and your dunes and your bunkers and your tees. Once again, you cut down again, removing, and then you cut down again, and you're constantly redistributing all the excavated material that you've cut away. And when you're done with it, you have something that looks roughly like this. And when they were done, the lowest holes at Whistling Straits were about 10 feet above the waterline, and you have these terraces here where you've got golf holes, and then you have these big inland dunes like this. This feat of engineering achieved 2 major goals that make Whistling Straits among the most recognizable and visually arresting golf courses in the world, and one that consistently ranks inside the top 30 on the Golf Digest America's 100 Greatest Courses list. It actually did transform the land into something that looks plausibly Irish. All the cutting made it possible to construct steep, fescue-covered dunes and real elevation changes, and to build in excess of 1,000 bunkers, ranging from deep, formal cavities to small, shallow scrapes, barely bigger than a bathtub. Probably more important, the layering meant that almost every hole at Whistling Straits has a view of the water. If the course had just been placed on top of the bluff, only the holes along the cliff would get the views. But by effectively elevating the inland holes and lowering those close to the shore, the water is a constant, dazzling presence throughout the round. The par-3s are a particular focal point of the Whistling Straits design. All 4 played down as close to the water as you can get, and at each one, you need to hit a shot over coves of fescue and bunkers and fractured dunes land. Both 9s have 1 par-3 running to the north and the other running south, including the 17th. So no matter what the wind is doing, you're going to get it equally from all angles. The role of the 17th is the enforcer. It's the keystone hole in a finishing stretch that includes the par-5 16th right before it and the killer par-4 18th, the Punisher, right after it. Dye used this closing configuration of par-5, par-3, par-4 so often in his marquee courses, he could have trademarked it. More than any other golf architect before or after, Dye built his new courses with the knowledge, or at least suspicion, that they were going to host big tournaments, including major championships, Ryder Cups, and PGA Tour events. This put him in the mindset of having to think about the way professional players hit the ball and score, about tournament ebb and flow, and spectator traffic, all to a degree that other architects didn't have to consider. He hit on his closing 5-3-4 gambit because it gave competitors the chance to pick up 1 or 2 strokes on a par-5 late in the round, which they loved. But then they had to turn around and try to hold on to those shots by passing through 2 grueling holes that started with a penal par-3 iron shot to a green surrounded by potential bogeys and double bogeys, which viewers loved. That's a scenario that's played out consistently at Whistling Straits. During the 2004 PGA Championship, the par-5 16th was the second easiest hole in relation to par, surrendering 2 eagles and 161 birdies. Then came the 17th, the most difficult par-3 on the course, followed by the 18th, the second hardest hole. The top 3 finishers that year played these 3 holes in a combined 9 over par during the final round, and none of them birdied the 17th. And these were the professionals that were playing the best that week. That pattern held up during the 2010 PGA, where once again the 16th hole was the second easiest on the course, yielding 7 eagles and over 150 birdies, followed by the 17th, that was the 4th toughest on the course, and then the 18th, that was the first, averaging over 4.5 strokes per player. Curiously, Dustin Johnson was one of the only players in contention to birdie 17 to take a 1-stroke lead into the final hole. But his birdie there was compounded by a 2-stroke penalty for inadvertently grounding his club in one of the course's 1,000 sand scrapes so far off the fairway that he didn't even realize it was a formal bunker. He missed out on the playoff by 1 stroke. The 17th was also tormenting during the 2021 Ryder Cup, at least for the Europeans. Half of the team matches on Friday and Saturday ended on that green, with the U.S. team building an 11-5 lead before Sunday singles, a horror they extended to a 19-9 final score. The genius of Pete Dye was not just that he could build holes that were fearsome and intimidating, but that he understood that there was a part of every golfer's psyche that was excited to be pushed to the edge. It's just like moviegoers who go into the darkness because they seek that experience of terror and the unknown. They want to be pushed to their psychological edge. Then they let out a deep breath and eventually come back for more. Golfers do the same thing at Pete Dye courses. For all his reputation as a tormentor and twister of golf souls, his best designs are wildly popular with the public and command top-dollar green fees, from TPC Sawgrass to the Ocean Course, and of course, Whistling Straits. In the end, holes like the Straits 17th show that perhaps our assumptions were wrong, and Dye had it right all along. Golfers actually do like to be terrorized, at least a little. Thanks for watching. If there are other holes you'd like to see us break down, let us know in the comments below.